Welcome to the Do Good Work podcast. Today we are talking to Darshan Mehta. Darshan is the CEO and founder of iResearch, a online focus group platform that enables companies to quickly and affordably extract insights from consumers worldwide. Darshan is also the author of the book Getting to Aha. Today's insights are tomorrow's facts to help business leaders understand and leverage changing consumer preferences, and they're always changing. In addition to his role at iResearch, Darshan is an adjunct professor at universities in Thailand, Sweden, France, and the US. Through the course of his work, Darshan has traveled to more than 80 countries and has been recognized in publications such as Forbes, Inc., the Journal of Advertising Research, and Quirk. Darshan, thank you so much for being on.
Hey, Raul, great to be on here. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to ask a question. It's like a tee in the tee ball. You're knock it out of the park. But I do want to kind of set up this premise because I find entrepreneurs and founders doing this incorrectly. And I kind of want to make it really paint an obvious answer, but also get your insights around the answer. The question is this: when we're either creating a new product for our market, for our industry, or we're creating a new campaign, is it best for it to be from within the organization to understand, hey, what do our customers want? What does the market want? And come up through ideas through internal brainstorms? Or should we directly ask the market and see, what do you want? And look at the trends. How do we marry both? And what is the best way of doing that?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you say you have to actually marry both, right? Oftentimes, for example, you're going to be an expert in your field or your technology, right? Because you see what trends are happening technologically and so on. But then you also have to have a pulse of what's going on with the marketplace and how people are going to use that and adapt to it. I'll give you an example. Like I think, I don't know Steve Jobs, but I'm kind of surmising some things here, right? When he came up with the iPod, he clearly was in the industry, knew that technology-wise, the cost for hard drives was coming down and that you could fit more and more on there and that it's becoming cheaper. They were not by far the first MP3 player out there. But he also knew there's a passion out there that people had with music. And one of the challenges was, how do you take your entire CD collection with you, right? And I remember taking, all my CDs and then having to swap it out and stuff. But he realized the hard drive prices are coming down. So I could actually put 1,000 songs in your pocket. If you remember, he did that presentation. And that was like a wow moment, right? But I think it was the merging of knowledge of technology in his business and his industry, combining that with what is out there as a pain point in the marketplace, right? People can't take all their music. So it's really the combination of the two. But sometimes making that marriage work perfectly, you're going to ultimately have to talk to your customers. Because one way or another, your marketplace is going to speak to you, right? And your choice is, do you speak sooner or listen to them sooner or later?
I'm gonna say that again, because this is very powerful. And this is, I find these dichotomies in different areas of business. And you're right. You're going to talk to the market one way or another, one day or another, but it's either, are you going to be proactive about it or reactive about it? You're going to wait till later. And that's really important. I like going back. So I've had a chance to meet Steve Blank and like the whole lean startup world and stuff like that. But when it comes to getting customer research, like, it sounds simple. I like to know, how can we proactively create strategies and even ongoing touch points to know what our market thinks, to be in the mind of the market, besides running like quarterly reports or quarterly brand search? Like how can we have something, even if you're a startup or even if you're like a nicely cushioned venture-backed startup, how can you set up these systems in place to continually outreach the market and get that feedback coming through? What have you found works?
So I've been very fortunate. I've actually been in consulting for over 20 years now for branding and market research. And as a result, I've done both quantitative and qualitative research. Basically, those are the only two methods. And that boils down to surveys or focus groups. And the one thing I've found is that a lot of people want to get at the why. And that is what makes people act, or triggers that make them do things or not do things, right? And I find that most people often end up going the survey route because that's what they're familiar with. And almost all of us have taken surveys. But here's the problem. A lot of us don't often come up with the best questions or answer choices because we're not part of the target market. So I often recommend actually having the conversations first with your customers, and then you'll have better answers, choices, and questions for your target market to actually quantify. But the first step is really getting at that why.
Mhm.
But the challenge has always been that's been too expensive. I mean, some of the most successful companies in the world have always done this. They talk to their customers, find out what's going on, and then they know exactly how to quantify that and get to product market fit.
Mhm.
And so companies that can do that well, and nowadays you can do it for a lot less money and make it more affordable. And that's partly what I'm trying to do with, my software and stuff, is trying to make it much more affordable and easier for people to have these ongoing conversations. And the good news is with the internet now, it makes it much easier to do this on scale.
Interesting. Let's talk about scale, because that to me, I mean, it's either focus groups or one-on-one conversations. You kind of need both, like the one-on-ones with the group settings, but let's talk about doing it at scale. How can we, theoretically speaking, just interview 1,000 customers, and then right now we're filming in like a little bit late mid Q3 2021. Let's talk about, I want to interview 1,000 customers, and by the end of Q3 for Q4, I want the report. I want to know what's the pulse. How would we do that?
Sure. So focus groups, I still argue that it's best to have anywhere from 10 to 15 people per group. And I'll tell you why. That's because the whole point of a focus group is to actually dive deeper into a topic. And what's interesting is kind of like, imagine yourself at a cocktail party, right? And you go there and you have a conversation with people. But if you have like one or two people, it's okay. But if you get like three or four, they're all focused on this topic. You're all like, oh, that's really cool. This is what you said. So you're allowed, it allows you to go deeper into the topic, and you'll feed off of each other. And that's what allows you to get into those kernels of thought, or that are really in your subconscious. Because oftentimes you're not really thinking about these things. You're just, 95% of our actions are done by our subconscious, right? These are things that just happen because we feel something, think something, but we haven't articulated that thought. But that's why a discussion among people that are focused on a topic allows you to do that deep dive. And then you start saying, oh yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. But then you feed off of each other. It's okay if you disagree. That's not a problem. The point is that you're doing a deep dive naturally in a conversation. So that's where the real value, that's where the insights are.
And then you're starting to extract. So would we do that like at the 10, 15 people multiple times throughout the week, multiple researchers going out once? How do we combat the cost of that if I have a full-time staff person, or if I don't have a full-time staff person?
Great question. So that's where platforms like the one I'm doing with iResearch, you can actually do this on a regular basis, because the cost is considerably lower than traditional outlets or traditional methods. And so I think it could actually get to the point where you could even do micro focus groups, for example. Because right now to do focus groups, it takes, a fair amount of time and investment. You want to get them for 2 hours, but if it costs less, you can do them on a regular basis. And I think to go on scale, for example, let's say if you and I spoke perfect Chinese and we want to launch a project in China, you could actually do the focus groups from here with people in China, as opposed to going there physically to do it. So you can actually do these things in multiple languages too. So that's where you get, you can avoid geographic bias or cultural bias to get feedback from different subsets.
When we get this feedback, and when we're trying, obviously with product market fit, but also even with brand development, and just to make it very clear for the premise of what brand is the feeling that you get when you think about a company or a slogan or a logo. Like that's the feeling, that's the brand capturing it, and you can obviously influence that in someone else. Now, when it comes to repositioning in the marketplace, making sure that your brand is up to date, obviously you don't want to change it every week or every month or quarter, but how do we take those insights that we get from focus groups or even from these research studies, and how can we apply them to either our tactical day-to-day or into our overarching annual strategies? What are some of the ways that we can take that data and actually put it to good use and reinvest it?
Sure. I think branding is one of the best ways to differentiate, because that's what's going to make you successful. So the first part of branding is really, you need to decide what it is you want to be. And that should also fit with what it is you can be, right? And then you basically set your North Star for you and your brand. And then you have these various data points, whether it's focus group surveys or ongoing feedback, even on social channels. And you start measuring. So you start at like a baseline, and then you want to measure how close are you getting to that. For example, when I mentioned Volvo to you, what do you think of? Like, what are the top?
Safe seatbelts.
Right. Now, when Volvo first came out, they weren't always known for that worldwide, right? That took some time, but now they own that mind share in your mind, right? And that's just something. So you need to kind of ask yourself, if there were 3 adjectives that would want associated with my brand, what would they be? And then you basically plot a plan to get there, right? And that takes some time. But the thing is, once you're focused on that and you actually deliver and you're true to your brand attributes and qualities, you'll get there.
Let's not dive into like the nitty gritty, but I want to kind of framework what you just set out, because I think it's really important to kind of understand the overarching strategy or framework, and then we can dive into like how to do it. But what I'm hearing here correctly, and I want to make sure that our audience knows, you define your brand. Let's put that at the top level, like an overarching arc. This is the brand. This is what I want it to be. If it's in the healthcare cosmetics, if it's in the IT tech AI, this is my brand. Define it. What's the feeling? Make it really simple. Like I don't want to say rude the way that I said this, but I always say make it stupid simple. Like if someone is only on 4 hours of sleep, does like seen 1,000 like articles already, make it so simple that it's clickable. So let's talk about, that's the overarching brand. And then you have different, let's call it data points in the market to identify what is the market actually saying. And that feeds up to a new baseline. What is it that I say that I am? What do others say that I am? And from there, you kind of take those insights to strategically reposition or reword or try to get closer to the brand ideal. Is that kind of what we're getting at here?
Exactly. And I think part of what if you kind of go back to often the inspiration to a product or service, right? I mean, for really successful entrepreneurs, it's usually because they had a pain point, right? Mm-hmm. They're saying, I hate the way this is done. This is a problem for me. And that's good, And so if you're actually set out to solve a problem, now think about what exactly are you solving and what are the opportunities there that exist in the marketplace that others aren't doing? Mm-hmm. And so how are you going to solve it differently or better? And then, find out what are the brand attributes that you want to associate with that. Right. And that's when then you start talking to your customers and saying, this is what I'm thinking with the product and the attributes. Are they aligning with what the market thinks? It might be an opportunity out there. And if there is, great. Then you have some good alignment and you can further deepen that. But if not, there's a little bit of a mismatch. I guess at least you get that feedback early on and you can alter what you need to without changing your whole trajectory in terms of where you want to go ultimately. Right.
Yeah.
But you need to align that for sure.
Yeah, and then you're getting feedback obviously from like what we talked about, either using software like iResearch or like market, study groups, et cetera, but also social listening tools. And that's why I don't want to dive into like the plethora of tools that are out there. I think if you know the framework, you can apply any tool that fits your budget, your need, your assessment. But we get those things to identify, not only what the market wants now, but it might also open loops for like trends that are happening in the marketplace. I don't want to say combat it. How do you deal with trends? Like to know, is this just like a fad? It's going to die in 9 months? Or is this an actual trend that's going to live on over a year, 2 years, or it's going to happen? It could get bigger in the next 10 years.
Yeah. And there's always going to be things that actually influence brands and how people think anyways, right? I mean, there's certain things you're going to do, but there's also societal trends that are happening that are beyond your control. For example, I think now, post-COVID, a lot of people are reevaluating how they spend their time doing various things, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the focus of their time is very different than it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. I think everybody's saying either in my personal or business life, I want to make every second, every minute count of some type of value. That's a big change.
Yeah.
Now, that might change again later on, but that's something that's going to affect a lot of people. So for example, how that translates to brands, I think more and more people are buying experiences versus just products now. And if they can also not only get an experience, but also somehow help society be better, right? Like if the product is sustainable or eco-friendly or any of these things, in addition to providing a great experience, it's more likely to be more successful.
Absolutely. And I think this goes back to like the classics with Peter Drucker, is that a business or a business model is an organism within society. So you can't just start like, okay, what are my goals? What do I want to do? It's like, what are the needs of the market? What are the changes I want to make? And I think companies that focus on mission first, like legacy first, people want something to root for. They want something to back for, and they want something that makes a difference. And I think either you want to work for these types of companies, and we can go like, I don't want to talk about the whole trends of like remote workforces and people like leaving their jobs because there's no mission, there's no core values. But also this is really important for us to understand when we're actually creating new products or service or repositioning the way that we address our marketplaces. This is pretty interesting. I kind of want to ask like one final question. This is a huge curveball, so we can completely say, Raul, let's like step back on this.
Can I add just one more thought to the last thing we talked about? Yeah. And that is that there's one thing I think entrepreneurs need to know is that in any given situation, there's
Uh-huh.
always a positive negative. In other words, there's always an opportunity and a cost, right? For example, even in COVID, right? I mean, tremendous destruction on many fronts, right? But at the same time, it's created a huge opportunity for tremendous reconstruction,
Mhm.
right? I mean, people are more adaptive to wanting to change things and do them online or have technological solutions. So I think you need to recognize that some of these things that are totally out of your control, they're going to happen no matter what. But recognize that there's always opportunities in any given situation. And good entrepreneurs know that somehow if they can make their product or service adapt to what's happening in the marketplace, but still stick with their core values and so on, there's still an opportunity there.
100%. And I think it's like and I love the way that you said that because it's looking at the good. Like obviously, when difficult situations happen, we have to definitely be empathetic and understand and be there and support, but also saying what's the good that can come out of this. And I think that takes courage, and it also takes like very strong leadership from the audience listening now, your team members, your leaders, your department heads, whatever. It takes a lot of leadership initiative to say what is the good that can come out and how can we create more of that good, how can we elongate that good, or how can we make sure that we take that good thing or that opportunity and help more people, because that you're completely right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing there's just certain laws of the universe that just exist, I think, right? And that is that everything has a positive and negative, right? I mean, we have a North Pole, South Pole, polarity. I mean, it just exists. So just recognize that there's definitely some, bad things that happen, but there's also the other side of the coin, that don't neglect because there might be some real opportunities there.
No, absolutely. And I love that frame of thinking. To go to like the last curveball question, this is something that I've been pretty curious about and understanding, especially with your insights in markets and trends. How can brands right now prepare for Web 3.0? How can we prepare for what's coming with a lot of the decentralization, a lot of the transparency, a lot of the autonomy? Like, how can we obviously get the feedback right now and the insights, and what are some suggestions if you have this research that startups or brands can do right now to prepare for Web3?
I think this is something that's always going to be there, and that even maybe more so with Web3, right? And that is you need to develop deeper connections with your customers. And the beauty is now with technology, you can do that many different ways and at scale, and you can customize your product and services even at scale as well, much faster and easier. But the key is developing deeper relationships. There's another core truth, I think, with the internet. At the end of the day, the internet has amazing things, but it really does one thing really well. And that is it basically connects people, right? I mean, even you look at Airbnb, you look at Uber, it's basically connecting people to do something that they're both interested in doing, right? So, and the thing is, I think where people and companies should really think about it, not just are we going to be in a digital world or a physical world? It's always going to be both, because we're humans and we need physical worlds. We need things as humans, but then we also want other things to basically save us time, money, or makes things easier. And so I would say that I would argue that if you can do one of those three things, right? If you can save people time, money, or make it easier, you're more likely to be successful. However, if you could do all three, I think you then have 3x chance of being successful. Right. And then I would actually add a +1. And that is if you can evoke an emotion. Right. So if you can save people time, money, and make something easier, I think you're going to be 3 times likely to be successful. But I would argue if you could tap into an emotion that's there, now you're talking, I don't know, 6x, 10x.
Yeah, because you accelerate those 3 wheels or those 3 parts of the triangle. And going back to the main principle here, like I know that Web3 is just something that's happening, a trend, but you kind of nailed it on the head, saying it's all about relationship. Humans will do business with humans, or a cause with humans. Like we're not at the point where computers are just taking things over, but I think it's so prevalent that the better the relationship and the brand and the emotional attachment that you have with your audience, with your network, regardless if we somehow end up in Mars or something crazy with Web3, you know what I mean? Like regardless of how things they'll still have that attachment. And I think the strong brands and leaders are not taking advantage, but also focusing on being proactive today, even during like these different shifts that are happening.
We humans are complex creatures, I mean, we have emotions. We have, we're not a simple, thing. And even I would argue AI is quite interesting. However, I would say AI is more automated intelligence than artificial intelligence right now.
Oh yeah,
because it doesn't quite have that emotional component that we as humans, it's a big part of being human, right? It is emotions, good, the bad. I mean, all of it. It's just part of being human. And those need to be factored in somehow. And that can't all be done completely, in digits and the zeros and ones.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Darshan, for our audience here today, what's the best place for people to go to? For one, thank you for this episode. Reach out to you and learn a little bit more about what you're up to.
Well, Raul, thank you very much. I love this opportunity, and I was looking forward to talking to you. And I knew we'd have a really good conversation. And thank you very much. The best way to reach me is that you can go to iResearch.com, or you can always just email me directly at dm@iResearch.com.
Cool. We'll put those links, your LinkedIn, on the show notes as well, as well as with the other app that you've developed in your book. But again, thank you so much for being on.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.